the COVID-19 pandemic, many of us have had to start working from home or work with a reduced staff or some hybrid situation. This has challenged us all to find better ways to connect and engage with one another. And engaging our fellow teammates is so important right now, maybe even more important than ever before. Without engagement, people can feel isolated, lonely, unappreciated, lack of passion for what they do, and just have an overall sense of unhappiness with their work. Take a beat to evaluate your own feelings about engagement with the work you're doing right now. Have you been struggling to engage with work activities? Think about how you've kept engaged. How can you apply your own personal experiences to your role as a champion in engaging others? It may be difficult to figure out how to engage employees to participate in wellness activities, which is why I'm here today to teach you how to use well-being activities to garner attention and connection in order to promote workplace engagement. This should be important to us all, as having engaged employees means happier and more productive employees. So next slide. Awesome. So in order to maximize engagement, there are several levels to go through. You can remember these as the 4 C's. Critical elements, they're at the bottom, communication, choose health, and community. At the bottom here, we have critical elements. This is the baseline level that involves identifying your environment and making a plan. Next comes communication, which is all about creating dialogue with your coworkers and soliciting feedback. This helps you to raise awareness about well-being messages. We can then level up to choosing health. On this level, you can start actively engaging virtual employees on how to be healthy, as well as identify and organize your well-being activities. Our final level is community. As the level implies, this is where we have created a community that fosters health and wellness in the virtual workplace. This level helps you to focus on social connection and meaningful engagement that is inclusive for everyone. I want to go over each of these levels in a bit more detail and give you some examples of how to reach each level. So next slide. The first level we're going to start with is critical elements, which involves your beginning stages where you're planning and assessing your situation. A good place to start is getting to know your audience. A lot of the time we may think we know what's best for our audience because we're the expert and we know best, right? But every audience is different. And what you may think works for one group might end up being a complete disaster for another. Instead of assuming, start by identifying what is meaningful to your audience and understanding what they want and need. Polls and surveys are incredibly useful at this. But you can also try just talking with your colleagues to find out what might work. I would also like to add here the importance of being inclusive to everyone and creating culture where everyone can feel supported and able to participate regardless of any disabilities they may have. So please take that into consideration when you're getting to know your audience. Next slide. So next is garnering management support. I think we all know if management isn't on board with something, it's not happening. So identify your leadership and what it would mean to have their support. Also think about who already supports you as a champion and how they can help. Try attending executive meetings, sending out email blasts, or having your department lead make some announcements. Next slide. Then you can move on to identifying challenges. On top of all the normal challenges you already face being a champion with getting people interested in programs and having them participate, the shelter-in-place orders have definitely added many new challenges to that. I know for me, when I started teaching classes on Teams, it wasn't only hard to get people to come, but also new challenges like providing them the right link and making sure they have a call-in number in case they get disconnected, and observing the chat while I'm teaching. It's Definitely been a struggle, which I'm sure some of you have experienced as well. But that's what I'm getting at here. By identifying challenges to virtual engagement, you're making sure everyone has the tools to participate, as well as the understanding and resources to use those tools. If you're struggling, it's a good idea to talk to your department to help you identify the challenges and find solutions. Next slide. And finally, we get to identifying goals for cadence and delivery. A goal in my workplace is to have a virtual class at the same day and time every week using the same Teams link. This makes it easier for people to participate as it's easy and consistent, and they can rely on it. I think a goal like this is important as it takes into consideration what my audience needs. I have management support, and it solves challenges presented by the virtual environment. By creating a goal such as this, you're really setting the foundation for all your engagement activities. If you're having trouble identifying goals, you can always reach out to your well-being coordinators, Lisa and Irene, for more help. So next slide. So I have just a few tips to share when you're at this stage of the game. First, make a plan. When you're in this virtual environment, having a plan for everything is essential. In your plan, you should consider what to do if you're having technical issues, how people can access the meeting if they're having technical issues, and whether you're going to be recording the meeting or not. You should also include in your plan how to make things accessible for those with disabilities, so they're able to participate as well. My next tip is to develop some general netiquette, like turning off phones, ignoring emails, being punctual. All right, be honest with yourself here. A few of you have already checked your phone or emails during this training session, haven't you? How has that affected your engagement? Do you feel like you've missed something? Are you struggling to follow along? Well, I hope not, but establishing some basic rules or netiquette will help people engage. Following that is keeping everyone on gallery view, which makes everyone appear on your screen in a grid so you can see everyone's faces. I know I appreciate seeing everyone's faces as it helps me connect with you all, and it feels just more personal. I also recommend encouraging people to turn on their camera. I know it might seem inconvenient and something you just really don't want to do, but it's so important not only for you and your engagement in the meeting, but for the speaker as well. I'll admit, when I'm in a virtual meeting with my camera off, which I tend not to try to do anymore, it just makes me more prone to checking my emails or playing on my phone or just generally not engaging with the content. I've also had a few people admit to me that they've fallen asleep during virtual conferences because it's just so easy to disengage from what's going on with having their camera off. On the other side, for this presenter, it can be frustrating to just be looking at a blank screen and not gauging how the audience is doing or if anyone's really there. So it's really important to establish that camera on culture in your activities. And my last tip is to use breakout rooms, which is a new feature on Teams. I find this helpful in fostering small group discussion and letting people get to know each other. So next slide. All right, so we've laid the groundwork by identifying what our team needs, gained leadership support, and made a plan. So it's time to level up with communication. For our purposes, communication is creating dialogue between you as the champion and your team. So not only telling them about programs and services, but also asking them for their feedback and interest. Some things you can do at this level include making announcements, doing one-on-one phone calls, and facilitating polls. It's also important to be transparent and forthcoming about challenges, as it helps to build trust. And in these uncertain times, being open and honest, I think, is highly valuable and might help draw more people in. If you're struggling with your communication efforts, reach out to your well-being coordinators for help. That's what they're here for, after all. They can help you develop some communication plans, as well as provide tools and templates to use. So next slide. All right, so a great way to communicate with staff is through recognizing them for their achievements and appreciating the value they add to your team. Being a champion means being a role model. So when you start recognizing people, others will start recognizing others, which helps to create a culture of appreciation in your workspace. And when people feel appreciated, they're more likely to put in more effort and participate more. Even something as simple as a thank you or giving them a shout out at a staff meeting can help someone to feel appreciated and start opening those lines of communication. So next slide. So I wanted to highlight some good apps and Teams you can use for anyone who's unaware. If you look to your vertical toolbar, and you click on that second to last box that says apps, it will take you to the Microsoft Teams App Store, where you can download some apps if your IT department allows. Some apps do require additional account setups, but once you add them, you can access them through those 3 little dots in the middle of your toolbar. And there's a ton of apps to choose from that can help you better communicate with your team, like Poly and SurveyMonkey for garnering feedback. Then there's Stream, which allows you to record short videos or messages and send them to your team. And lastly, there's that great app that's like the Captain America shield there, but in blue. And it's called Recognize. You know how I was just talking about the importance of recognition? Well, there's an app for that. Recognize helps you to facilitate recognition and lets people earn badges for their efforts. There's a ton of apps for all kinds of different things, so make sure you check out the App Store. Next slide. So I wanted to highlight several spotlights that have happened over the last few months to show some creative ways your colleagues have been engaging employees in this virtual environment. The first spotlight is the airport director's live stream. So since March of 2020, the airport director has been providing updates and responding to questions via live stream broadcast. This is a great example on how they're effectively communicating with their team. The airport is creating dialogue by allowing employees to ask questions and get answered on the live stream so that everyone's aware. They're also being transparent by giving regular updates. So consider trying something like this in your workplace. All right, next slide. All right, time to level up again. So we've talked about our critical elements and how to communicate, and now it's time to choose help. At this level, we're getting back to the core parts of being a champion and bringing wellness activities back to the workplace. According to a recent well-being survey about COVID-19, participants reported needing help with their emotional and physical well-being during the pandemic. So as a champion, I hope you're already thinking about things you can do at this level, but let's go over some examples on how you can engage employees in the virtual well-being that focus on their emotional or physical well-being. The next slide. Starting with emotional well-being, I think 2020 has really been challenging for all of us emotionally. I know I've struggled with it. But there are many activities we can do to improve not only our emotional well-being, but engage our team in activities that can help them as well. As a champion, I hope you all have been taking part of some of the established programs and are looking forward to some coming up, like the How to Handle Holiday Stress class on December 11th. You can also be requesting wellness workshops from SFHSS aimed at improving emotional well-being, such as yoga or meditation. You may also decide to facilitate your own emotional well-being activities. Try to get creative here in replicating some activities you've done in the past, but for a virtual audience, like a virtual coffee break. You could ask like 3 or 4 coworkers to a Teams meeting in the morning for like 5 to 10 minutes, and just chat while you drink your morning coffee or tea, either one. This way you get to talk to others and create that social connection while still practicing safe social distancing guidelines. So next slide. So DAS has already tried some of these methods by hosting an after-work happy hour and a virtual bingo night. Like I was just talking about with the virtual coffee break, social connection is so important for emotional well-being as it helps us to relate and not feel alone. These wellness activities are a fun way to relax and get to know each other and build connections that many of us have maybe lost during this pandemic. So next slide. Moving on to physical well-being, just like for emotional well-being, there are several ways you can engage your team to be more active while sheltering in place. Whether it's simply by participating in a virtual exercise class or requesting a physical activity seminar, or just starting a walking club, there are many ways to promote physical well-being in your team. They're pretty easy to do as well. Even though I'm back in my office now, when I was working at home back in April, my supervisor and I implemented weekly walk and talks. So every Monday morning at 9 a.m., we'd both get up and walk around our separate neighborhoods and call each other to talk about how things were going, any problems that have arisen, and just like normal work chit chat. This way, we both got exercise and some social connection as well. Next slide. So time for another spotlight. So the CPC wellness team used to meet regularly for stretch breaks, which is awesome because it gets you moving and away from your desk. And they have seamlessly transferred that into the virtual environment. In fact, SFHSS offers virtual stretching every Tuesday and Thursday at 3 p.m., which is great for improving physical well-being and engaging employees. You could even try doing a stretch break at the beginning or end of your next virtual staff meeting. So it's very easy to do, and I'd recommend it. Next slide. So now it's time to level up one last time and become a community. Fostering a sense of community helps to connect your team and alleviate feelings of loneliness and isolation. At this level, we're trying to bring back the sense of community we all miss, like having talks at the water cooler, walking to work with a coworker, coffee breaks, and more. Let's look at some activities you can do to put the feelings of community back into your virtual workspace. So next slide. So one of the best ways to foster community is through get-to-know-you activities. Some get-to-know-you activities could be things like Mr. Roger calls or mini TED Talks. You could do something where you have a coworker present 5 minutes every week on something they're good at or know how to do. So for instance, if it was my week to present, I could do crocheting, which is something I enjoy and I'm good at, and I could talk about things I've made and how to crochet and where I learned it. Just thinking of this as a way to get to know people outside their professional capacity and get to know them on a personal level and foster social connection, like I was talking about. Team building is also essential to fostering a sense of community in your space. Trying creative activities for your team to do together that helps them to bond and relax, like spreadsheet pixel art, which I'll come back to. It's really interesting. Or having everyone plant their own garden, even if it's just like in mason jars. Lastly, create a fun and relaxed virtual environment by embracing an emoji culture. Research has shown that we process emojis much like we do facial expressions. So when you send someone a good job smiley face email, they actually process it as you smiling at them, which creates good feelings. By embracing the emoji culture, you can improve communication, company culture, and productivity. So next slide. So isn't this awesome? It's called pixel art. It's a great team building activity you can try with your team. I find this a very good team building activity that's also relaxing. It's kind of like coloring, but in an Excel spreadsheet. And it helps to create team bonding and feelings of connectedness. I listed the website to find out more information here above the picture, and I recommend checking it out. The website has some great team building activities. So next slide. All right, so here's our last spotlight. The ASR has implemented a weekly roll call to get people talking by posting fun questions, letting people share stories, and posting pictures. This fosters a sense of community by creating social connection and bonding experiences in the virtual environment. So next slide. All right, that seemed to go by really fast, but that's it for the content portion. Before we move to our activity, I just want you to remember what we talked about in the beginning, which were the critical elements. We talked about knowing your audience, management support, and identifying challenges and goals. Remember, your ultimate goal is to create opportunities that will promote workplace engagement through well-being activities and programs.